So today we're going to talk about understanding employment responsibilities and rights. This is going to be part one of two for this topic in your course. Learning outcome one is about knowing your statutory rights and responsibilities. So of you and the employers within your own area of work, so your own sector. When we say statutory rights and responsibilities, we are talking about laws and regulations. So, first job is outline employee rights and responsibilities under employment law. Now, employment law is anything that does relate or could relate to people in the workplace. And outline does mean name a law or regulation and give the key points of it, a few key points. Some of it is quite long, like the Health and Safety at Work Act has quite a lot of information in it. Some key points are that it says that everybody is entitled to a safe working environment. Another one that's going to be relevant in a lot of healthcare related roles is going to be that PPE must be provided at no charge to the employee. So those will be two key points. The Equality Act 2010 says, well, it prohibits discrimination under a few protected characteristics like disability, age, or gender. The Employment Rights Act is another one, and that says it lays out your statutory rights relating to childcare, like if you need time off for childcare, among other things. The National Minimum Wage Act 1998, but there have been a lot of amendments since. That is about setting the minimum wage and the framework for the minimum wage. As you know, at the moment and for the last few years, the minimum wage does depend on your age and on certain factors. It's different if you're in an apprenticeship as well. So the National Minimum Wage Act covers that. Transfer of Undertakings Regulations 2006. That one you might not have ever heard of. It is when a company changes ownership. This law lays out employee rights and the employer responsibilities in those cases, like regarding redundancies. So, give a few key points. There's more than this out there. Oh, I didn't even mention the Working Time Directive. That's an interesting one. That one is about, let's say, if you're under 18 or under 17, how many hours can you work? As an adult, how many hours can you work as well? It's averaged out usually over a 17-week period, and it should be 48 hours or less during those per week, 48 hours on average per week should be your maximum over that 17-week period. So that does mean that if you work 60 hours one week, you should work less another week, so it averages out. It also says that you can choose to opt out of that 48-hour maximum. Okay, next, describe how related legislation can support employees in the workplace. Now, it does say describe, so you do have to give a few examples of how it could work. And it does say support. So while the last one said outline the legislation, now we want to say about how it works practically for people. So we've picked a couple here. We have the Workplace Health, Safety and Welfare Regulations 1992. This says that there must be adequate heating and lighting, and that staff facilities like toilets and drinking water have to be provided and they have to be adequate. This supports people because it leads to a more comfortable and healthier workplace. Because if you don't have adequate heating and lighting, you'll get eye strain, it'll affect your immune system if you don't have enough heating. It just won't be as healthy. We have the Health and Safety Display Screen Equipment Regulations, 1992. This one says that the employer must carry out risk assessments on people using display screen equipment. That can be computers, TV screens, anything like that. You should have adequate breaks from screens. Most people say about 5 minutes every hour to make sure that you're just not looking at the screen all the time. And that you should have regular eye tests and information about screen safety as well. Another one that's going to be useful, especially in the health sector, is going to be Personal Protective Equipment at Work Regulations, 1992. So again, PPE must be supplied at no cost. It has to be suitable and safe for what you're doing. Right, so we have to describe employer responsibilities in the workplace. You might want to refer to the legislation in particular here. So under such and such a law, the employer has the responsibility to do whatever. You can talk about providing PPE free of charge, making sure it's safe and adequate, making sure people are trained on how to use the PPE, trained on how to use any other equipment, and providing people with safety information, making sure that people in a workplace, we should have the health and safety executive poster with people's health and safety information and a health and safety representative up on the wall somewhere employees can see it. Employers have to ensure that the company and everyone is compliant with legislation and standards. They shouldn't discriminate. They have a responsibility to provide a safe workplace, including being free from bullying or harassment, and ensuring confidentiality or data protection. They will hold your bank details to pay you. They might hold some health information on you from the risk assessments. There is a responsibility to protect your information as well. Okay, identify sources and types of information and advice on own employment rights and responsibilities. So, your organization's policies and procedures would be a good place. Your company handbook will have a lot of information about your rights and responsibilities as well. Your human resources department might be able to clear questions up for you, or your manager might be able to clear some things up for you. If you had further questions or you weren't sure, you could go to, if there's a dispute, you could go to ACAS. If you have further questions, you can check the Citizens Advice website. It has a lot of good information. It's general. If you had something more specific, maybe you could talk to one of their representatives and they might be able to help you. You could go to the government website. That website there, you can find information on usually summaries of laws like the Equality Act or the Health and Safety at Work Act, and you can read that and that might clear things up for you as well. It's also good to be able to refer to the law that you're interested in particular and the section of it. All right. Next one, understand agreed ways of working that protect your relationship with the employer. Agreed ways of working means your policies and procedures. So what you do every day that's been agreed. Like if you were answering the door to a visitor, you might check their ID, check their identity, have them sign in, and notify the person they're visiting that they're there. That would be an agreed way of working for security. All right. So, explain the terms and conditions of your own work contract. In that, you want to get a copy of your contract if you don't already have it or if you've lost it. And you want to have a look at what it says about your annual leave, working hours, salary or pay scale, pension provision, sick leave, how much warning or notice your employer must give you if you're dismissed, and how much warning or notice you should give your employer. And it usually says about redundancy pay as well. If something comes up, it might not be in every contract, but it usually is. And in that, it does say explain, so you would want to give a few examples of what it actually says. So it won't do to just list things like I have done here. I've just identified terms and conditions that are in your work contract. You want to describe them a little bit, explain about them. So if I was saying about annual leave, you might have it a bit differently, but the basic, the like statutory provision for annual leave is that if you're working full time, 40-ish hour a week, then you're entitled to 20 days annual leave and 8 bank holidays. If you're working part-time, that might be different. It'll probably be a bit less, or if you've been working with the same company for longer, they often add annual leave days. You could put down as well if you're staying, if it does have that provision in your contract that if you stay for a year, you might get another day's annual leave up until, usually they stop around 35 days. But it depends on your own contract. You need to describe information shown on your pay statement. So we have gross pay, which is your pay before any deductions. Net pay is the pay after the final pay that's going into your bank account. So after all deductions. Your national insurance number will be there, so that will link to your taxes. Deductions, these are flexible deductions because they depend on how much pay is going in. Like the gross pay, it'll be a percentage of gross pay, and that will be national insurance and other taxes. And any fixed deductions like union fees would also be shown on there. So make sure you describe it. Have a look at your own pay slip and see what's on there. Make sure you understand and you can find everything. Next we have explain procedures to follow in the event of a grievance. Now again, for this one, you are going to need to look up your grievance procedure. You'll either be able to find it in the policies and procedures book if you ask your manager where it's stored in the office, or if you've got an intranet, you'll be able to find it there as well. It might be under complaints procedure, it might be under grievance procedure. So you need to read your own. It usually includes steps like, it might include, the first step might be to verbally raise the issue with your line manager. It might say about writing a letter stating your grievance to the employer, like stating it in detail, giving times and dates and being very specific. You might need to attend a meeting with your employer to discuss the issue. It might say about whether you can have anyone join you for that meeting. And it should as well most likely say about appeals procedure. So if you don't agree with the outcome of, let's say, the meeting, then what can you do to appeal it? Who can you take that to? Next, we've got identify the personal information that must be kept up to date with the employer. It does say identify, so you just have to list. It can be things like contact details, address, phone number. Oh, I put in address twice. I meant to say email address is there as well. Okay. So they need your contact details. If you're sick one day and you don't call in, they need to be able to check on you. They need to be able to send you correspondence, and maybe phone number if I don't know if there's an emergency and you're not supposed to come in that day for some reason. Let's say there was, hopefully never, a fire at the office and they're shutting down for the day while they assess it and clean up. They want to phone you to save you coming in. Emergency contact details, if there's an accident and they need to call someone for you, they'll need to have that and it'll need to be up to date. And if you change your name, if you get married, divorce, or you just decide to change your name by deed poll, then they'll need to know about the name changes and if that's been updated on, let's say, bank details. Oh, bank details to pay you as well, that would be a good one to give them. There we go. So, explain agreed ways of working with the employer. So again, agreed ways of working are the policies and procedures that you need to follow. For this, I gave you an example already for security. Name some of your health and safety agreed ways of working. It could be to do with your manual handling or using equipment. It could be to do with PPE. What do you need to do? Where do you, let's say, used gloves, what bin do they go in? Data protection. What do you have to do to make sure that, let's say, service user information stays secure and nobody sees it? Communication, you could talk about work emails. Usually there's going to be something in your policies and procedures about only using it for work purposes. Loan working, if you're out. Loan working is when you're out of your base working area by yourself. Some people, like people in domiciliary care, they're most often out by themselves. And then other people are never meant to be out lone working by themselves. They're always meant to be working in pairs. But what are you meant to do? Often it is some people, if you're with a patient transfer, you'll often have a GPS or tracker. So you can be tracked from base and they'll be able to see where you are. And usually you're also meant to check in. When you arrive somewhere, you're meant to check in. Often domiciliary care workers will have that as well, that there'll be a little app on their phone that they can check in on and check out when they leave a location, or that they phone into the office and say that they've arrived and that they're leaving. And using equipment, that could be anything. It could be stretchers, it could be hoists, it could be computer equipment. Any sort of equipment that you're using, what do you need to do? And that's it. That's the end of part 1 of the Employment Rights and Responsibilities unit. There is part 2. Have a look at the questions in your workbook. I'd recommend starting the questions in your workbook now while this is fresh in your mind, and then have a look at part 2. Thanks very much.